What happens when an alien empire's greatest shame becomes humanity's most unexpected ally? When retired Marine Captain Sarah Chen received a gift from the Zephyrian king, a wolf-like alien warrior stripped of honor and thrown away like garbage, she had no idea she was about to witness something that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization itself. The wolf had one simple message that would change everything. Your species, you fight like us, but you do something we forgot how to do. You never leave your pack behind. In a universe where strength determines worth and the weak are discarded, one human veteran and one broken alien warrior are about to remind everyone what true honor really means. This is the story of how humanity's greatest weapon isn't our technology or our numbers. It's something far more dangerous to those who rule through fear. It's our refusal to abandon those who need us most. The rain hammered against the windows of Sarah Chen's small cabin in the Montana mountains, each drop like a tiny bullet against the glass. She sat in her worn leather chair, staring at the fire crackling in the stone fireplace, trying to ignore the phantom pain in her left leg where shrapnel had torn through muscle and bone 3 years ago on Europa Station. The doctors had done what they could, but some wounds never truly heal. The silence of her retreat was shattered by the distinctive whine of atmospheric engines. Sarah's trained ear immediately identified the sound as non-human technology. She grabbed her service pistol from the side table and moved to the window, peering through the rain-streaked glass at the massive ship descending from the storm clouds. The vessel was unmistakably Zephyrian, all flowing curves and bioorganic design that looked more grown than built. Golden light pulsed along its hull in patterns that hurt human eyes to look at directly. Sarah had seen ships like this during her time serving in the Outer Rim conflicts, but never this close to Earth, and certainly never landing in her backyard. The ship settled onto her property with surprising grace for something the size of a small building. Steam rose from its hull as the rain evaporated on contact with the superheated metal. A section of the ship's side dissolved like liquid metal, forming a ramp that extended toward her cabin. 3 figures emerged from the ship. The first 2 were clearly Zephyrian nobility, tall, elegant beings with elongated limbs and skin that shimmered with an internal luminescence. They wore flowing robes that seemed to shift color with each step, and their faces bore the proud, angular features typical of their species. Between them, they dragged something, or rather, someone. The creature they hauled through the mud was unlike anything Sarah had seen before. It was roughly humanoid but larger, perhaps 7 feet tall, with a powerful muscular build. Its body was covered in thick, dark fur that was matted with blood and dirt. The head was distinctly wolf-like, with a long muzzle filled with sharp teeth and pointed ears that lay flat against its skull. Chains bound its arms and legs, and what looked like a neural inhibitor collar sparked around its thick neck. Sarah's military training kicked in. She holstered her weapon but kept her hand near it as she stepped onto her covered porch. The rain immediately soaked through her flannel shirt, but she ignored the cold. "You are Sarah Chen, formerly Captain Chen of the Terran Marine Corps?" The lead Zephyrian's voice carried clearly despite the storm, translated by the universal communicator that all species used for intergalactic commerce. "I am, and you're trespassing on private property." Sarah's voice was steady, betraying none of the curiosity and concern churning in her gut. The Zephyrian's luminescent skin flickered in what Sarah recognized as amusement. "I am Ambassador Veltar of the Zephyrian Empire. I come bearing a gift from His Imperial Majesty, King Zarthol the Magnificent. I didn't order anything from your king. Nevertheless, it is yours." The ambassador gestured to his companion, who activated a device that caused the chains to dissolve. The wolf creature collapsed to its knees in the mud, breathing heavily. "This is Korath, formerly pack leader Korath of the Fendrian people. He is now your property to do with as you see fit." Sarah stared at the ambassador, then at the creature, Korath, kneeling in her yard. "I don't own people, or aliens. Whatever he is, he's not my property." The Fenrians are a conquered species. This one failed in his duties and has been stripped of rank and honor. By Zephyrian law, he is property to be disposed of. The king thought a human veteran might find use for a disgraced warrior. What kind of use? Sarah's voice had gone dangerously quiet. Labor, entertainment, target practice. It matters not. He is yours until death claims him. The ambassador turned back toward his ship. Do try to get some value from him before he expires. The Fenrians are stubborn that way. Wait just a damn minute. Sarah stepped off her porch, ignoring the rain that immediately plastered her hair to her skull. You can't just dump a sentient being on someone's property like he's a piece of furniture. The ambassador paused at the ramp. The alternative was immediate execution. Consider this mercy. He gestured to the wolf creature. Besides, your species has a reputation for keeping pets. Perhaps this one will prove more entertaining than your usual animals. The ship sealed itself and lifted off before Sarah could respond, leaving her standing in the rain with a 7-foot-tall alien wolf chained at her feet. She watched the vessel disappear into the storm clouds, then looked down at Korath. The creature, the person, she corrected herself, was looking up at her with eyes that held an intelligence that was unmistakably aware. They were golden, like a wolf's eyes, but there was something deeper there. Pain, certainly. Exhaustion, but also a fierce dignity that even his current circumstances couldn't quite extinguish. Can you understand me? Sarah asked. Korath's ears twitched, and he nodded slowly. When he spoke, his voice was deeper than she'd expected, with a growling quality that came from his wolf-like vocal cords. I understand. Your language was taught to me during interrogation. The neural inhibitor around his neck sparked again, and he winced. Sarah could see burn marks where the device made contact with his skin. That thing is hurting you. It is designed to. It suppresses my natural abilities and causes pain when I attempt to use them. Korath's voice was matter-of-fact, as if he was discussing the weather. Sarah knelt in the mud beside him, ignoring the way the cold water soaked through her jeans. What abilities? Enhanced strength, speed, and senses. The ability to communicate with my pack across great distances. The collar blocks all of it. Your pack? For the first time, something like anguish flickered across the alien's features. Dead. All of them. Killed in the final battle when we refused to surrender unconditionally. Sarah studied the collar. It was clearly Zephyrian technology, all smooth curves and bioorganic integration. But she'd seen similar devices during her military service. This is a slave collar. We developed countermeasures for these during the Rim Wars. You would free me? Korath's ears perked up slightly. Why? Because slavery is illegal on Earth. And because nobody deserves to be treated like property. Sarah stood and extended her hand. Come on, let's get you inside and see what we can do about that collar. Korath stared at her hand for a long moment, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. You would help me. I am your enemy. My people fought against yours in the outer conflicts. Right now, you're not my enemy. You're just someone who needs help. Sarah kept her hand extended. And I don't abandon people who need help. Slowly, carefully, Korath reached out and took her hand. His was larger than hers, with thick fingers ending in retractable claws, but his grip was gentle. Sarah helped pull him to his feet, noting how he favored his right leg and the way his breathing hitched with pain. You are injured. Nothing fatal. The Zephyrians were thorough in their interrogations. Sarah felt anger flare in her chest. She'd seen the aftermath of Zephyrian interrogations during the war. They weren't known for their gentle techniques. How long were you their prisoner? 6 months. Since the fall of my homeworld. 6 months of torture and degradation. Sarah looked at this proud being who had somehow maintained his dignity despite everything that had been done to him, and she made a decision that would change both their lives. Well, you're not their prisoner anymore. You're under my protection now. She turned toward the cabin. Come on, let's get you cleaned up and fed, then we'll work on getting that collar off. I do not understand. Korath limped behind her, clearly struggling but refusing to show weakness. Why would you do this for me? Sarah paused at her front door and turned to look at him. Rain dripped from his matted fur, and the neural inhibitor continued to spark against his neck. But his golden eyes held hers with unwavering intensity. During my last mission, my unit got pinned down by Vorthan raiders on a mining asteroid. We were outnumbered 3-1, and I took shrapnel that should have killed me. My team had a choice: leave me behind and complete the mission, or risk everything to get me out. What did they do? They came back for me. Every last one of them. We lost the asteroid, but nobody got left behind. Sarah opened the door and held it for him. That's what good people do, Korath. They don't abandon their own. I am not your own, maybe not yet, but you're not alone anymore either. Korath followed her into the warm cabin, his eyes taking in the simple but comfortable furnishings. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, and the walls were lined with books and military memorabilia. It was the home of someone who valued quiet and solitude, but also someone who had lived a life of service. Sit by the fire, Sarah instructed, pointing to a large chair that looked like it might accommodate his frame. I'll get some towels and see what I can do about that collar. As Korath settled carefully into the chair, wincing as his injuries protested, Sarah disappeared into another room. He stared into the flames, trying to process what had just happened. In 6 months of captivity, he had been beaten, tortured, humiliated, and finally discarded like refuse. He had expected to die in chains, forgotten and alone. Instead, a human veteran who owed him nothing had offered him shelter, food, and freedom. Sarah returned with an armload of towels and what looked like a military-grade electronics kit. I managed to jury-rig a few of these collars during the war, she explained, kneeling beside his chair. The trick is disrupting the neural feedback loop without triggering the punishment protocols. If you are wrong, it could kill me. If I do nothing, it'll kill you anyway. These things aren't designed for long-term use. The neural damage becomes permanent after about 8 months. Sarah began examining the collar, her fingers gentle as they traced its contours. We're going to get this thing off you, Korath. I promise. As she worked, Korath found himself studying this human female who had shown him more kindness in 20 minutes than he had received in half a year. She was smaller than him, obviously, but there was a strength in her movements that spoke of military training and combat experience. Her hair was dark and shot through with premature silver that he suspected came from stress rather than age. Her face bore small scars that marked her as a veteran of real fighting, not ceremonial combat. Why were you discharged from your military? He asked quietly. Sarah's hands paused for just a moment. Medical retirement. The shrapnel in my leg didn't heal properly. I can still fight, but not to military standards. Yet you live alone in this isolated place. I needed quiet, space to think. Sarah resumed her work on the collar. Sometimes the silence of war follows you home. Korath understood that better than she knew. He had been pack leader of the Fenrian resistance, responsible for the lives and deaths of thousands of his people. The weight of that responsibility, and of his ultimate failure, was something he carried with him every moment. There, Sarah said suddenly. I think I've got it. The collar made a sound like breaking glass, then went silent. A moment later, it split open and fell to the floor with a heavy thud. Korath gasped as sensation flooded back into his body, his enhanced senses returning all at once in a rush that was almost overwhelming. He could smell everything now. The wood smoke from the fire, the rain outside, the lingering scent of gunpowder on Sarah's clothes, and underneath it all, her natural scent that marked her as pack, or at least potential pack. But more than that, he could feel the absence of his true pack like a physical wound. The mental connection that had bound him to his people was gone forever, severed by death and distance. He was truly alone now in a way that his species was never meant to be. Sarah must have seen something in his expression because she sat back on her heels, giving him space. Are you all right? I am. Free! The word came out like a prayer. Korath flexed his hands, feeling his claws extend and retract without the collar's interference. I had forgotten what it felt like. Good. Now let me see those injuries. For the next hour, Sarah cleaned and bandaged Korath's wounds with the efficiency of someone who had done battlefield medicine before. She didn't comment on the evidence of torture she found, but Korath could see the anger building in her eyes with each new mark she discovered. They really did a number on you, she said quietly as she wrapped a particularly bad burn on his forearm. They wanted information about human military tactics. They believed I had fought alongside your forces. Did you? Korath hesitated. Once. During the Battle of Kepler Station, a human unit was pinned down by Zephyrian forces. My pack, we helped them escape. Sarah's hand stilled. What was the unit designation? I do not recall the exact term, but their leader was a woman with dark hair and a scar on her chin. She fought like a berserker when her people were threatened. Sarah's breath caught. Captain Maria Santos, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines. You know her? She was my commanding officer. Sarah's voice was soft with memory. She died holding the line while the rest of us evacuated civilians from Kepler Station. We never knew how her team made it out of that trap. Your pack leader was a warrior of great honor. She refused to leave wounded behind, even when it would have been tactically sound. That was Maria. Sarah finished bandaging his arm and sat back. So you're the one who saved them. My pack and I simply did what was right. Sarah studied his face for a long moment. The Zephyrians called you Disgraced. What really happened? Korath's ears flattened against his skull. When my homeworld fell, they offered terms. Unconditional surrender in exchange for the lives of non-combatants. But the terms included mandatory sterilization of all Fenrian females and the removal of all cubs to be raised as Zephyrian slaves. You refused. We fought to the last. My people, my pack, they died rather than accept slavery. Korath's voice was thick with pain. I was captured in the final battle, the only survivor of my bloodline. Sarah reached out and placed her hand on his massive forearm. I'm sorry. That's not disgrace, Korath. That's honor. Honor. Korath laughed bitterly. I failed them all. I let my pack die. You fought for their freedom, for their dignity. There's no dishonor in that. Sarah's grip tightened. And you're not the only survivor. You're the one who carries their memory forward. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire burn down to glowing embers. Outside, the storm was beginning to pass, and the first rays of dawn were breaking through the clouds. What happens now? Korath asked finally. Sarah stood and stretched, wincing as her injured leg protested. Now you heal. You rest. You decide what you want to do with your freedom. I have nowhere to go, no pack to return to. Then you stay here until you figure it out. Sarah turned to face him. Unless you want to leave, you're free to go whenever you choose. Korath looked around the cabin, at the warmth of the fire, at the books lining the walls, at this human female who had shown him more kindness than he had any right to expect. For the first time in 6 months, he felt something other than despair. I would like to stay, if you will have me, Sarah smiled, and it transformed her entire face. Welcome home, Korath. As the sun rose over the Montana mountains, painting the storm clouds in shades of gold and crimson, neither Sarah nor Korath realized that their simple act of compassion was about to set in motion events that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. They had found something in each other that both species had forgotten in the endless cycles of war and conquest. They had found Pack. 3 weeks had passed since Korath's arrival, and Sarah was beginning to understand why the Zephyrians had considered the Fendrians such a formidable enemy. Even injured and recovering from months of torture, Korath possessed a strength and resilience that was remarkable to witness. She watched from her kitchen window as he split logs in her backyard, his powerful frame moving with fluid efficiency despite the bandages still wrapped around his torso. The morning sun caught the dark fur on his arms as he worked, and she could see the muscle definition that even malnourishment hadn't been able to diminish. More impressive than his physical capabilities, however, was his character. In the 3 weeks he'd been staying in her guest room, Korath had never once complained about his circumstances. He helped with chores without being asked, was unfailingly polite, and seemed genuinely grateful for the simple dignity of having a clean bed and regular meals. But Sarah could see the shadows that haunted him. She recognized them because she carried similar ones. The way he sometimes stopped mid-conversation, his golden eyes distant as he remembered something painful. The nightmares that woke him in the small hours, though he tried to muffle any sounds behind his door. The careful way he avoided talking about his past beyond the basic facts. They were both broken in their own ways, she realized, two veterans trying to find their place in a peaceful world that no longer seemed to fit them. The wood supply should last through next winter now, Korath said as he came through the back door, wiping sweat from his fur-covered brow with one of her old towels. You didn't have to do all of that in one morning. I usually spread that job out over a week. I am accustomed to keeping busy. Idle hands make for troubled thoughts. Korath accepted the glass of water she offered him. Besides, I owe you a debt I can never repay. This is the least I can do. You don't owe me anything, Korath. We've been through this, have we? You saved my life, gave me shelter, fed me, tended my wounds. In my culture, such kindness creates bonds that cannot be easily dismissed. Sarah leaned against the kitchen counter, studying his face. What kind of bonds? Pack bonds. Family bonds. You have shown me the loyalty that pack members show each other. Kor set down the empty glass. Among my people, you would be considered pack now. The closest translation in your language would be sister in arms. Sister in arms, Sarah repeated softly. I liked that. Their quiet conversation was interrupted by the sound of vehicles approaching on the mountain road that led to her cabin. Sarah moved to the front window and cursed under her breath at what she saw. 3 black SUVs were making their way up her private drive, the kind of vehicles that government agencies favored when they wanted to make an impression. She counted at least a dozen figures in the cars, and from their disciplined movement as they exited the vehicles, she could tell they were military or intelligence. We have company, she said grimly. Korath moved to join her at the window, his enhanced hearing picking up sounds she couldn't detect. Armed. Multiple weapon signatures. They move like soldiers, but dress like, what is your word for secret police? Spooks. Intelligence agents. Sarah checked her service pistol, knowing it would be useless against this many trained operatives, but feeling better for the familiar weight. The question is, which agency sent them and what they want? The answer came in the form of a woman in an expensive black suit who approached the front door while the others established a perimeter around the cabin. She was tall and blonde, with the kind of perfect appearance that screamed government upper management rather than field operative. Miss and Chen? I'm Director Patricia Hayes from the Department of Xenological Affairs. I need to speak with you about your house guest. Sarah opened the door but didn't invite the woman inside. He's not my house guest. He's a refugee under my protection. Refugee? Director Hayes' perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. Ms. Chen, the creature you're harboring is a war criminal. A terrorist who was responsible for the deaths of over 300 Zephyrian civilians in bombing attacks on their outer colonies. That's bullshit, Sarah said flatly. I have documentation that says otherwise. Hayes produced a tablet and showed Sarah what looked like official Zephyrian military reports. Pack leader Korath of the Fenrian Resistance planned and executed 17 separate terrorist attacks against civilian targets. The Zephyrian Empire has demanded his extradition. Since when do we extradite people to alien governments? Since Congress passed the Interstellar Cooperation Act last year. We have treaty obligations now. Hayes glanced past Sarah toward where Korath stood in the living room. The Zephyrians are prepared to offer significant concessions in exchange for the terrorists' return. New trade agreements, technology sharing, mineral rights to several asteroid fields. So you're here to hand him over. I'm here to take custody of a dangerous alien who shouldn't be running loose on American soil. Hayes stepped closer. Ms. Chen, I understand you have a soft spot for strays, given your military background, but this isn't some wounded animal you can nurse back to health. This is a hostile alien with enhanced physical capabilities and a history of violence. Have you read his actual service record? Or just the Zephyrian propaganda? I've read enough to know that he's dangerous. Hayes' voice hardened. You have two choices here. Turn him over voluntarily, or we take him by force. Either way, he's coming with us. Sarah heard Korath move behind her, his claws extending with a soft snick. She held up a hand without turning around, trusting him to understand the gesture. You want him? Sarah's voice was deadly quiet. Come and take him. Hayes smiled coldly. Miss Chen, you're a decorated veteran, and I respect your service. But you're also one retired Marine with a bad leg facing 12 trained agents. Don't make this harder than it has to be. 13 trained agents, Sarah corrected. You forgot to count him. The terrorist? He's not going to fight for you. He knows what'll happen if he resists. No, said a deep voice from behind Sarah. He does not know, because he has never had someone fight beside him before. Korath stepped up next to Sarah, his massive frame filling the doorway. Even unarmed and still bearing the marks of his captivity, he was an intimidating presence. His golden eyes fixed on Director Hayes with predatory intensity. I have heard what your government calls me. Terrorist, war criminal. But your own Sarah Chen knows the truth. I fought to protect my people from enslavement and genocide. If that makes me a terrorist in your eyes, so be it. Korath, Sarah said quietly. No, Pack Sister. This must be said. Korath's voice carried the authority of someone who had commanded others in battle. Director Hayes, you speak of documentation provided by my people's conquerors. Would you trust the word of those who enslaved your children? Who sterilized your females? Who burned your cities and called it peace? Hayes' confident expression flickered. The Zephyrians are our allies. The Zephyrians are your masters. And you are too blind to see the chains. Korath stepped forward, and several of the agents in the yard reached for their weapons. I will not resist if you take me. I have no wish to bring harm to those who showed me kindness. But know this, every atrocity the Zephyrians committed against my people, they will eventually commit against yours. That is their nature. You're lying. Am I? Have you seen the treaty terms they offer? The technology they're willing to share? Korath's ears flattened against his skull. They give you just enough to make you dependent, then slowly increase their demands. First, they want territory for trading posts. Then mineral rights. Then military bases. Then, he gestured to himself. Then they want you to hand over those who inconvenience them. Sarah saw something in Hayes' expression shift, just slightly, a flicker of doubt. That's enough, Hayes said firmly. Chen. Humor me, one veteran to another. Sarah had noticed the small pin on Hayes' lapel, a military service decoration. 5 minutes to review the charges against him. If they're legitimate, I'll step aside. Hayes hesitated, then handed over the tablet. 5 minutes. Sarah scrolled through the documents, her expression growing darker with each page. Korath watched her face, reading the anger building there. These are interrogation transcripts, Sarah said finally. Forced confessions extracted under torture. They're official Zephyrian military records. They're the kind of bullshit the Gestapo used to justify their actions. Sarah shoved the tablet back at Hayes. Every single attack listed here was a military target. Zephyrian weapons depots, troop concentrations, supply lines. The only civilians mentioned are Zephyrian military dependents, who were housed at military installations. Civilians are civilians, not when they're being used as human shields, and definitely not when the alternative is watching your entire species get enslaved. Sarah's voice rose. You want to talk about war crimes? How about the systematic sterilization of an entire species? How about the abduction of children to be raised as slaves? Where are those charges in your documentation? Hayes's jaw tightened. That's not relevant to. It's entirely relevant. You're about to hand over a resistance leader to the same people who committed genocide against his species. Sarah stepped closer. And for what? Trade deals? Technology? When did we start selling out refugees for profit? The decision has been made at the highest levels of government. Then the highest levels of government are wrong. The standoff was interrupted by the sound of more vehicles approaching. Sarah looked past the line of agents to see a convoy of military vehicles coming up her drive. Real military, not the black-suited spooks Hayes had brought. The lead vehicle bore the insignia of the Judge Advocate General's Corps, and Sarah felt a grim smile tug at her lips. Someone with actual legal authority had arrived. A figure emerged from the lead Humvee that Sarah recognized immediately. Colonel James Martinez had been her regimental commander during the Outer Rim conflicts, and she'd served under him during some of the bloodiest fighting of the war. "Stand down, Director Hayes," Martinez called as he approached the cabin. "This operation is suspended pending legal review. Colonel, this is a matter of interstellar diplomacy. The military has no jurisdiction here." The military has jurisdiction over the treatment of prisoners of war and refugees, which is what this individual appears to be. Martinez handed Hayes a legal document, writ of habeas corpus, signed by federal judge Amanda Zhao. Mr. Korath is to be remanded to military custody pending a formal review of his status. Hayes scanned the document, her face flushing with anger. This is highly irregular. So is kidnapping refugees to satisfy alien demands. Martinez turned to Sarah. "Captain Chen, good to see you again. Colonel, I should have known you'd turn up in the middle of this mess. When I heard that Patricia Hayes and her goons were planning to snatch an alien refugee off American soil, I figured someone should ask a few legal questions." Martinez looked at Korath, his expression neutral but appraising. "You're the Fenrian resistance leader?" "I am Korath, formerly pack leader of the Northern Fenrian Defense Force." "Any relation to the Korath who helped Captain Santos's team escape from Kepler Station?" Korath's ears perked up in surprise. "You knew of this?" "Captain Santos mentioned it in her final report. Said a group of Fenrian fighters provided covering fire that allowed her team to extract wounded civilians under heavy bombardment." Martinez extended his hand. "It's an honor to meet you." Korath stared at the offered hand for a moment, then carefully took it. "The honor is mine, Colonel." Hayes watched this exchange with obvious frustration. "This changes nothing. We still have treaty obligations." "We have legal obligations too," Martinez replied, "and those include not handing over potential refugees to governments that may have committed war crimes against them." He turned back to Korath. "Are you willing to submit to protective custody while we sort this out? Will I be separated from my pack sister?" Korath indicated Sarah. Martinez looked between them, noting the easy way they stood together and the protective stance Sarah had unconsciously adopted. "Ms. Chen, would you be willing to serve as his sponsor during the review process? It would mean taking responsibility for his actions and ensuring his availability for hearings." "Absolutely. Then no, you won't be separated. But there will be conditions, regular check-ins, movement restrictions, that sort of thing." "I accept these terms," Korath said formally. Hayes stepped forward, her professional composure cracking. "This is a mistake. The Zephyrians will see this as a betrayal of our alliance. Then maybe they'll understand what it felt like when they betrayed the Fenrians," Sarah said coldly. As Hayes and her agents departed, their vehicles disappearing down the mountain road with obvious reluctance, Martinez remained behind to go over the legal requirements of Korath's new status. The review board will want to hear your story, he told Korath as they sat around Sarah's kitchen table. Everything that happened during the war, the circumstances of your capture, the conditions of your imprisonment. I will tell them whatever they wish to know. Good, because there are a lot of people in Washington who are starting to ask hard questions about our relationship with the Zephyrians. Martinez accepted a cup of coffee from Sarah. Your testimony could be crucial in determining our future policies toward them. What kind of questions? Sarah asked. The kind that should have been asked before we signed a treaty with an empire that practices slavery and genocide. Martinez's expression was grim. We've been so eager for their technology and trade opportunities that we've ignored some uncomfortable facts about their methods, such as the fact that they've conquered and enslaved over 30 different species in the past century, such as their pacification protocols that involve systematic population reduction of resistant species. Martinez leaned back in his chair, such as intelligence reports suggesting they view humanity as their next conquest target once they're done consolidating their hold on the outer systems. Korath's ears snapped to attention. You have learned of this? We've intercepted communications. Nothing definitive, but enough to suggest that their long-term plans for Earth aren't as benevolent as they've led us to believe. This does not surprise me. It follows their standard pattern. Korath's voice was heavy with knowledge. First, they offer alliance, trade, technology. They make you dependent on them. Then they begin making demands. Small ones at first. A trading post here, mineral rights there. But each demand is larger than the last. What's the end game? Complete subjugation. They will demand military bases on your world for mutual protection. They will insist on joint patrols in your space. They will offer to help you deal with troublesome elements in your population, those who oppose their influence. Korath's claws extended and retracted unconsciously. And one day you will wake up to find that you are no longer the rulers of your own world. Martinez exchanged a look with Sarah. Is there any way to break the cycle? Only if you act before it is too late. Only if you choose to fight rather than submit. Korath's golden eyes were sad, but determined. My people waited too long. We believed we could resist gradually, diplomatically. We were wrong. What would you recommend? Understand what you are truly facing. The Zephyrians are not merely conquerors. They are slavers who have refined the art of domination across centuries. They do not simply want your resources or your territory. They want to break your spirit, to make you grateful for their rule. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. How long do we have? That depends on how quickly they believe they can move without triggering united resistance. If they think your species will fight as one, they will move slowly, carefully. If they believe you are divided, Korath shrugged. Perhaps a decade, perhaps less. Martinez stood, his expression thoughtful. I need to get back to Washington with this information. Korath, the review board will want to meet with you within the week. Sarah, keep him safe. And both of you, watch your backs. Hayes isn't going to give up easily. After Martinez left, Sarah and Korath sat in comfortable silence as the afternoon light faded outside. Finally, Sarah spoke. Are you sorry you stayed? This is going to get complicated. No, Korath replied without hesitation. This is what pack means. We face danger together rather than alone. Even if it means going up against an entire galactic empire? Korath's lupine features stretched into what might have been a smile. Pack's sister, I have spent 6 months being tortured by that empire. After finding family again, do you truly think I fear them? Sarah reached across the table and grasped his massive hand in both of hers. Then we'll face whatever comes next. Together. Outside, the first stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Neither of them knew that their conversation had been monitored by Zephyrian surveillance satellites, or that even now ships were being dispatched to deal with what the Zephyrian High Command considered a growing threat to their carefully laid plans for Earth. But they would learn soon enough, and when that time came, They would discover that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from standing alone, but from finding those who will stand beside you no matter the odds. The call came at 3 in the morning, jolting Sarah from a restless sleep. She grabbed her secure phone from the nightstand, immediately alert despite the early hour. 6 months of living with Korath had sharpened her already considerable survival instincts. "Sarah, it's Martinez! You need to get out of there!" Now, she was already reaching for her clothes before he finished speaking. "What's the situation?" Zephyrian ships dropped out of hyperspace an hour ago. 3 heavy cruisers heading for Earth orbit. They're claiming diplomatic immunity, but our sensors are picking up weapon signatures that suggest otherwise. How long do we have? They'll be in orbit by dawn. But that's not the worst part. Martinez's voice was grim. Hayes has convinced the Secretary of State that Korath represents a clear and present danger to Earth-Zephyrian relations. She has authorization to use any means necessary to bring him in. Sarah cursed quietly as she pulled on her boots. Through the thin walls of her cabin, she could hear Korath moving in the next room. His enhanced hearing had undoubtedly picked up the conversation. "There's more," Martinez continued. 3 hours ago, a joint FBI-Dixay task force raided the safe house where we were keeping 2 other Fenrian refugees. Both are now in federal custody and being prepped for extradition. They're cleaning house. It gets worse. The review board that was supposed to hear Korath's case? Disbanded by executive order 20 minutes ago. The administration is cutting all ties with anyone who might complicate the new enhanced partnership with the Zephyrian Empire. Sarah's blood ran cold. What enhanced partnership? Technology transfer agreements, military cooperation protocols, and a new clause that gives the Zephyrians the right to request extradition of any individuals they classify as terrorists or war criminals. Retroactive? Very retroactive. They're even asking for Captain Santos's service records, claiming she committed war crimes by associating with Fendrian resistance fighters. Sarah felt rage building in her chest. Maria Santos had been one of the finest officers she'd ever served under, and she died saving civilian lives. The thought of her name being dragged through the mud by alien slavers was intolerable. "Where do we go? I'm texting you coordinates for a safe house in Colorado." But Sarah, they're not just coming for Korath anymore. Hayes has convinced someone high up that you're a security risk too. They have warrants for both of you. On what charges? Harboring an enemy alien. Conspiracy against the United States. Treason. Martinez paused. They're throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. Sarah looked out her window at the peaceful Montana landscape she'd called home for 3 years. She'd known this day might come, but that didn't make it any easier to accept. How much time do we have? Tactical teams are probably 15 minutes out, maybe 20 if you're lucky. That's enough. Sarah was already moving toward her closet, pulling out the go bag she'd hoped never to use. "Jim, are you officially involved in this operation?" "Officially? I'm in Washington attending boring budget meetings." "Unofficially?" There was a smile in Martinez's voice. "I must have misplaced my secure phone somewhere. Hope nobody finds it and uses it to make unauthorized calls." "Understood. We'll be in touch." Sarah ended the call and found Korath standing in her living room, fully dressed and holding a large military duffel bag. He'd moved with the silent efficiency of a predator, gathering what appeared to be weapons and tactical gear. "How much did you hear?" "Enough to know that our enemies have moved faster than expected." Korath's golden eyes were calm but alert. "Your government has chosen appeasement over honor." "Not all of it. Martinez is still on our side, and he wouldn't be taking these risks if he was alone." Sarah shouldered her pack and checked her service pistol. "But you're right about the timing. We're about to become very unpopular with the wrong people." "Where will we go?" "Safe house in Colorado, at least initially, but we can't stay anywhere too long. They'll be monitoring all the usual places." Korath nodded and moved to the window, his enhanced senses scanning the darkness outside. 3 vehicles approaching from the main road. Military configuration. I estimate 12 to 15 personnel. Time to go. Sarah grabbed a small device from her desk drawer and activated it. Thermite charge, she explained as Korath raised an eyebrow. Can't let them get their hands on my computers or files. They slipped out the back door as the first vehicles pulled into her driveway. Sarah's property backed up against thousands of acres of national forest, terrain she knew like the back of her hand from years of hiking and hunting. In the darkness, with Korath's enhanced night vision to guide them, they had every advantage. They'd been moving through the forest for 20 minutes when the explosion lit up the sky behind them. Sarah's cabin erupted in flames as the thermite charge did its work, taking with it years of memories but also any intelligence the raiders might have hoped to gather. The flames will be visible for miles, Korath observed as they paused on a ridge overlooking the valley. Good. Let them know we're not going quietly. Sarah adjusted her pack and checked her compass. The safe house is 40 miles from here. We can make it by tomorrow night if we push hard. Sarah, Korath's voice was quiet. You should leave me. Go to your Colonel Martinez. Claim I forced you to help me. You could still salvage your life. Sarah turned to stare at him. Are you out of your mind? I am a realist. You have a chance to escape this with your reputation intact, but only if you distance yourself from me now. Korath, let me explain something about humans, specifically this human. Sarah stepped closer, her voice fierce despite her efforts to keep it quiet. We don't abandon family. We don't sell out friends to save our own skins. And we sure as hell don't hand over pack members to alien slavers. But you could. I could what? Betray everything I believe in to save my own hide? Forget that Maria Santos died protecting people like you. Sarah shook her head. I've made my choice, and it wasn't made lightly. We're in this together, for better or worse. Korath stared at her for a long moment, his alien features unreadable in the darkness. Your species is remarkable. We have our moments. Sarah started walking again. Come on, we have ground to cover. They traveled through the night, using game trails and stream beds to avoid leaving tracks. Korath's enhanced stamina made the journey easier than Sarah had expected, though she could tell he was pushing himself to match her pace despite his still healing injuries. As dawn broke over the Colorado Rockies, they finally reached the coordinates Martinez had provided. The safe house turned out to be a rustic hunting cabin tucked into a valley so remote it didn't appear on most maps. Solar panels and a small wind turbine suggested it was off-grid, and the sophisticated antenna array on the roof indicated it was anything but abandoned. About time you showed up, said a familiar voice as they approached the front door. Sarah spun to find Colonel Martinez stepping out of the shadows, wearing civilian clothes and carrying a rifle that definitely wasn't military issue. Jim, what are you doing here? I'm on vacation. Unofficially? He gestured toward the cabin. Welcome to the headquarters of the Free Earth Coalition. Though what now? Turns out I'm not the only one who has problems with our government's new policy of rolling over for alien slavers. Martinez led them inside, where Sarah was surprised to find the cabin's rustic exterior concealed a sophisticated command center. Banks of computers lined the walls, and tactical displays showed real-time intelligence from across the solar system. 3 other people were present, and Sarah recognized all of them from her military days. Captain Rebecca Torres, formerly of Naval Intelligence, Major David Kim from Special Operations, and Lieutenant Colonel Susan Walsh, who had commanded the defense of Titan Station during the worst of the Rim Wars. Sarah! Good to see you made it. Torres stood and embraced her warmly, though I have to say, you know how to pick your enemies. The Zephyrians are not happy about your house guest. How not happy? Kim answered from his position at one of the computer stations. Their ambassador formally demanded that the president declare martial law on Earth until Korath is captured. They're also insisting on the right to station occupation forces in major population centers for security purposes. Please tell me the president said no. Walsh's expression was grim. He said he'd consider it. Congress is already calling for hearings on the Fenian terrorist crisis. The media is running stories about how dangerous alien refugees represent a clear threat to homeland security. Sarah felt sick. How did it happen so fast? The Zephyrians have been preparing for this moment for months, Martinez explained. Every concession they've made, every trade deal they've offered, has been designed to make Earth dependent on them. Now they're calling in those debts. Korath had remained silent during this exchange, but now he stepped forward. May I see your intelligence reports on Zephyrian fleet movements? Torres hesitated, looking at Martinez. Is he cleared for that? He's probably got better intelligence on their capabilities than we do, Martinez replied. Show him what we've got. Korath studied the tactical displays for several minutes, his expression growing darker. This is not a diplomatic mission. This is a preliminary invasion force. Come again. 3 heavy cruisers, each carrying a full battalion of occupation troops. Support vessels with medical facilities, supply depots, and what your sensors probably read as communications equipment, but which are actually control systems for neural compliance networks. Sarah's blood chilled. Neural compliance? Psychic conditioning technology. They can broadcast on frequencies that affect human brain chemistry, inducing everything from mild compliance to complete behavioral control. Korath pointed to one of the displays. If those ships achieve stable orbit and begin broadcasting, your species will become as docile as cattle within a matter of weeks. That's impossible, Kim protested. Humans have natural resistance to psychic manipulation. Do you? Have you tested this resistance against Zephyrian technology? Korath's golden eyes were sad but certain. I thought my people were resistant too. We were wrong. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Finally, Walsh spoke up. How long do we have? If they begin broadcasting immediately, perhaps a month before the effects become irreversible. But they will likely start slowly, with low power tests to gauge resistance levels. Korath turned to Martinez. Colonel, what defensive capabilities does your planet possess? Against 3 heavy cruisers? Not much. Our orbital defense platforms are designed to stop asteroids and space debris, not warships. And your fleet? The 5th Fleet is in the outer system, but they're outnumbered and outgunned. The Zephyrians have better shielding, better weapons, and decades of combat experience. Martinez ran his hands through his hair. We're looking at a technological gap of at least 50 years. Then, conventional resistance is impossible. Sarah leaned against the wall, feeling the weight of the situation. So we're screwed. Earth becomes a Zephyrian slave world. And there's nothing we can do about it. Not nothing, Korath said quietly. There is one option, but it would require your people to do something that mine could not. Which is, unite, fight as one species rather than as competing factions. Korath's voice carried the weight of hard-won experience. The Zephyrians conquered my people because we remained divided until the end. Some clans wanted to fight, others wanted to negotiate, still others wanted to flee to distant worlds. We never presented a united front. And you think humanity can do better? I have seen what your people are capable of when you fight for something you believe in. Captain Santos died to save civilians she had never met, simply because it was right. You risked your life for a stranger you had no obligation to help. Your Colonel Martinez has risked his career to oppose policies he knows are wrong. Korath straightened to his full height. These are not the actions of a species that will submit easily to slavery. Torres was typing rapidly at her computer station. I'm pulling up population distribution data and communication networks. If we're going to organize resistance, we need to know who we're working with. It won't be easy, Walsh warned. The government will brand anyone who opposes the Zephyrians as terrorists. The media is already pushing the narrative that resistance equals treason. Then we don't work through official channels, Sarah said. We work through the networks that matter. Military veterans, first responders, people who've actually sworn oaths to protect others. Kim looked up from his station. I've got contacts in 43 states. Special operations people who won't roll over for alien invaders, no matter what Washington says. I can reach out to the intelligence community, Torres added. There are a lot of people in the agency who have serious concerns about our new allies. Eh? Martinez nodded. And I've got connections throughout the regular military. Plenty of officers who remember what we swore to defend. What about the general population? Walsh asked. We can't fight this war with just military personnel. Sarah thought about the countless small towns she'd driven through over the years. Places where people still believed in taking care of their neighbors, where the idea of foreign occupation would be met with fierce resistance. Americans don't like being told what to do by their own government, let alone by aliens, she said. Once people understand what's really happening, once they see what the Zephyrians have planned for us, she shrugged. This country was founded by people who fought a revolution over a tax on tea. How do you think they'll react to mind control? Korath moved to the window, his enhanced senses scanning the morning sky. We do not have much time. The Zephyrian ships will achieve orbital insertion within hours. Once they begin their broadcasts, even at low power, they will start affecting population centers. Then we better get to work. Martinez turned to the communication equipment. Time to make some calls. As the members of the newly formed Free Earth Coalition began reaching out to their contacts, Sarah found herself standing next to Korath at the window. In the distance, she could see contrails high in the atmosphere, evidence of the alien ships approaching their new positions. Are you sure about this? She asked quietly. About humans being able to unite against the Zephyrians? Korath was quiet for a moment, his golden eyes reflecting the morning light. I have learned something about your species in the months I have lived among you. Something that gives me hope. What's that? You do not simply fight for yourselves. You fight for each other. You fight for strangers. You fight for principles that matter more to you than your own safety. He turned to look at her. That is something the Zephyrians have never faced before. They have conquered species that fought for survival, for territory, for resources. But they have never faced a species that fights for love. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from the recognition that they were about to embark on something that would determine the fate of humanity itself. Then we better make sure love is enough, she said. Outside, the first Zephyrian cruiser took its position in Earth orbit, its alien hull gleaming like a star against the blue sky. Inside the ship, officers prepared to begin the first phase of what they expected to be a routine conquest. They had no idea they were about to discover what happened when you threatened the pack bonds of a species that considered the entire planet to be family. 2 weeks after the Zephyrian ships took orbit, Sarah barely recognized the world around her. The changes had been subtle at first. People seemed more agreeable, more willing to accept government announcements without question, more inclined to view the new interstellar security measures as reasonable precautions rather than the beginning of occupation. But Sarah and her team at the Colorado Safe House had been protected by Korath's modifications to their base. Using knowledge gained during his captivity, he'd helped them construct neural dampening fields that blocked the Zephyrian broadcasts. It was crude technology compared to what the aliens possessed, but it was enough to keep their minds clear while the rest of the planet slowly fell under alien influence. The reports coming in from their network of contacts painted a disturbing picture. Military bases were accepting Zephyrian advisors without protest. Police departments were implementing new crowd control protocols designed by alien specialists. Major news outlets had stopped reporting on anything that might be construed as criticism of Earth's new protectors. Most chilling of all, the missing Fenrian refugees had been publicly executed as terrorists, their deaths broadcast across every major network as a warning to anyone who might harbor enemies of interstellar peace. It's working exactly like Korath predicted, Torres reported as she compiled the latest intelligence. The broadcasts are making people more compliant, more accepting of authority. Resistance groups that should be forming aren't even getting started, because potential members can't maintain focus on anything that contradicts the official narrative. Sarah studied the tactical display showing the positions of the 3 Zephyrian ships. They'd spread out to provide coverage over most of the inhabited regions of Earth. their neural compliance broadcasts reaching nearly 2 billion people directly and affecting others through secondary exposure. What about our protected sites? Martinez asked. 17 facilities operational and growing, Kim reported. We've got safe houses from Alaska to Florida, each one shielded and staffed with personnel who remember what we're fighting for. But we're still talking about maybe 3,000 people total. 3,000 against an empire that's conquered 30 worlds, Walsh muttered. The odds aren't exactly in our favor. The odds were never in our favor, Sarah replied. But we're not just fighting for ourselves anymore. She gestured to the newest addition to their command center, a communication array that Korath had helped them construct using components scavenged from abandoned military installations. The aliens' knowledge of Zephyrian technology had proven invaluable in more ways than one. Korath, show them what you've discovered. The Fenrian warrior moved to the communication station, his massive hands surprisingly gentle as he operated the delicate controls. I have been monitoring Zephyrian military communications since their arrival. Their command structure assumes they are facing a primitive species with no understanding of their methods, meaning they are not encrypting their tactical communications beyond basic security protocols. They believe humans lack the technology to intercept or decode their transmissions. Korath's lupine features curved in what might have been a smile. They are incorrect in this assumption. B. A stream of alien text flowed across the display, followed by a translation protocol Korath had written. Sarah read the intercepts with growing alarm. Phase 2 begins tomorrow night. Complete neural mapping of major population centers, followed by implementation of behavioral modification protocols. Korath confirmed. Within 72 hours, anyone within range of their broadcasts will be incapable of independent thought regarding Zephyrian rule. And Phase 3? Korath's expression darkened. Selective breeding programs. Sterilization of undesirable genetic lines. Removal of children for educational relocation. The same protocols they used on my people. The room fell silent. Sarah felt rage building in her chest, not just at the Zephyrians, but at her own government for enabling this atrocity. How many people are we talking about? Torres asked quietly. Initial estimates suggest they will have complete behavioral control over approximately 60% of Earth's population within 1 week. The remainder will be affected to lesser degrees, but still sufficient to prevent organized resistance. Martinez stood and began pacing, his military mind working through the tactical implications. So we have less than 24 hours before this becomes unstoppable. To prevent Phase 2, yes. But there is another option. Korath pulled up a different set of displays. The neural compliance broadcasts require significant power and precise coordination between all 3 ships. If even one ship were disabled, the entire network would become vulnerable to disruption. You're talking about attacking a Zephyrian heavy cruiser. With what? We don't have anything that could even scratch their shields. Actually, we might, Kim said slowly. He was studying readouts from one of their reconnaissance drones. The Zephyrians aren't the only ones who've been busy these past 2 weeks. Kim pulled up a series of satellite images showing activity at military installations across North America. At first glance, they looked normal, routine maintenance and supply operations. But Sarah's trained eye began to pick out details that didn't belong. Are those electromagnetic pulse devices? Improvised, but functional. Seems like someone in the Pentagon had similar thoughts about our alien friends. Kim's grin was fierce. They've been quietly installing EMP arrays at 47 different locations, all disguised as routine infrastructure upgrades. EMPs won't penetrate Zephyrian shields, Walsh pointed out. No, but they'll disrupt the neural compliance broadcasts if they're properly coordinated, Korath said. The Zephyrian ships use quantum entanglement for their targeting arrays. A simultaneous EMP burst across multiple frequencies could force them to reset their systems. How long would that take? Perhaps 30 minutes? Long enough for people to remember who they really are? Sarah felt a spark of hope for the first time in weeks, long enough to organize real resistance. If we can coordinate the timing, and if we can get word to resistance cells without using communication channels the Zephyrians are monitoring, Martinez turned to Torres. What do we have for secure communications? Old-fashioned radio networks mostly. Ham operators, emergency services, some military frequencies the aliens don't seem to monitor. Torres pulled up a map showing radio coverage across the continent. We can reach about 40% of the population directly, assuming they're listening. They'll be listening, Sarah said with certainty. With trust, Teddy, Americans might be getting mind-controlled, but our preppers and conspiracy theorists have been waiting their whole lives for something like this. They'll have their radios on. Korath moved to another console, his claws clicking as he input calculations. I can provide the exact frequencies and timing for the EMP bursts, but someone will need to transmit the coordination signals manually. The Zephyrians will detect and jam any automated systems. That's suicide, Kim said bluntly. Whoever sends those signals will be painting a target on themselves for every alien ship in orbit. Not necessarily. Sarah was already moving toward her gear. Not if they're expecting one transmission from one location. What are you thinking? I'm thinking we give them what they expect. One crazy human terrorist making a last desperate attempt to coordinate resistance. Sarah began checking her weapons and equipment. While they're focusing on hunting down that transmission, our real coordination happens through the secure networks. Martinez caught her arm. Sarah, this is what needs to happen. Sarah's voice was calm but determined. Someone has to send the signal from a high-power transmitter, and whoever does it won't be coming back. Better it's someone who volunteers than someone who gets ordered. I will accompany you, Korath said simply. Like hell you will. Sarah. Korath's voice carried the authority of someone who had commanded others in desperate situations. You cannot operate a high-power Zephyrian frequency transmitter alone. You need someone who understands their technology. Then teach me. There is not time. And besides, Korath's golden eyes held hers. This is what Pack means. We face the greatest dangers together. Before Sarah could argue, Torres called out from her station. Guys, we have incoming. 3 vehicles, federal plates, moving fast up the access road. Sarah cursed and moved to the window. Through the trees, she could see black SUVs approaching. The same kind Director Hayes had brought to her cabin what felt like a lifetime ago. How did they find us? Kim was already at his computer, fingers flying across the keyboard. Someone's been tracking our communications. They've got a lock on our position. Government or Zephyrian, does it matter? Walsh was checking her rifle. Either way, they're here to stop us. Martinez made a command decision. Torres, Kim, start the data wipe KA. Everything but the coordination protocols gets destroyed. Walsh, you're on perimeter defense. Sarah, Korath, if you're going to do this thing, you need to leave now. The transmission equipment is in the bunker, not here. This was always just the planning site. Martinez handed Sarah a set of coordinates. 5 miles north, hidden in the old mining complex. Everything you need is already in place. Sarah looked around the command center one last time, at the people who had risked everything to give humanity a fighting chance. They were about to be captured or killed, and they all knew it. Jim, go. Make this count. Martinez's expression was grim but determined. And Sarah, when this is over, when Earth is free again, remember that some of us never stopped fighting. Sarah and Korath slipped out the back entrance as the first federal agents reached the front door. Behind them, they could hear gunfire erupting as their friends made their last stand. The mining complex was a relic from Colorado's gold rush days, abandoned for decades and forgotten by everyone except the military planners who had seen its potential as a hidden installation. Korath led the way through the underground tunnels, his enhanced senses navigating the darkness with ease. The transmission chamber was a marvel of improvised engineering. Banks of amplifiers and frequency generators surrounded a central console that looked like something from a science fiction movie. Cables ran everywhere, connecting power sources to transmission arrays to targeting computers that had been jury-rigged for military surplus. "This will work?" Sarah asked as Korath began powering up the systems. "The hardware is adequate. The question is whether the coordination timing can be maintained." Korath's claws danced across the alien control interfaces he'd helped design. "The EEM bursts must occur within a 15-second window to maximize disruption of the neural compliance network." Sarah activated the radio equipment and began broadcasting on the predetermined frequencies. "This is Free Earth Prime to all resistant cells. Operation Clarity begins in T-10 minutes. Repeat, Operation Clarity in 10 minutes. Prepare for synchronized action on my mark." Responses began flooding in from across the continent. AM radio operators, military units still loyal to their oaths, civilian groups that had somehow maintained their independence despite the alien broadcasts, hundreds of voices confirming their readiness to strike back. "EME arrays report ready status," Sarah continued. "Targeting data being transmitted now." Korath uploaded the precise frequency and timing data to each location, his understanding of Zephyrian technology allowing him to identify the vulnerable points in their neural compliance network. "Sarah," Korath said quietly as they watched the countdown timer tick toward 0, "if this fails, it won't fail. But if it does, what you have done, what your people have attempted, will be remembered. My pack brothers died, believing they had failed to save our world, but they succeeded in saving something more important. They saved the idea that freedom is worth fighting for." Sarah looked at this alien warrior who had become family, who was about to die alongside her in a desperate gambit to free a world that had tried to hand him over to his torturers. "Korath?" "Yes. When we get out of this, I'm adopting you, officially, as my brother." For a moment, Korath's predatory features softened into something almost human. "I would be honored, Pack Sister." The timer reached 0. "With trust, Teddy." Sarah keyed the transmitter. All units. This is Free Earth Prime. Execute Operation Clarity. Execute now." Across North America, 47 EMP arrays activated simultaneously. Electromagnetic pulses raced across multiple frequency bands, targeting the quantum entanglement fields that link the 3 Zephyrian ships in their neural compliance network. For exactly 37 seconds, the alien broadcasts stopped. In cities and towns across the continent, millions of people suddenly remembered who they were. They remembered their children being taken for educational assessment. They remembered signing agreements they would never have signed with clear minds. They remembered watching their neighbors disappear for asking inconvenient questions. And they remembered that they were Americans, and Americans don't surrender. The uprising began in 1,000 places at once. Police officers arrested the Zephyrian advisors in their departments. National Guard units surrounded alien installations and demanded the return of abducted citizens. Civilian groups stormed government facilities where collaboration agreements were being negotiated. Most importantly, military units that still remembered their oaths turned their weapons toward the sky and began firing everything they had at the ships that had tried to steal their planet's soul. In the underground bunker, Sarah and Korath watched the chaos unfold through satellite feeds and radio reports. The Zephyrian ships were responding with devastating efficiency, their weapons turning entire city blocks to plasma. But for every installation they destroyed, 2 more appeared to take its place. "It's working," Sarah breathed. "They're fighting back." "Yes," Korath said sadly. "And now the Zephyrians will abandon all pretense of peaceful occupation. They will attempt to break your species' will through pure brutality." Even as he spoke, reports began flooding in of orbital bombardments targeting major population centers. The aliens were no longer bothering with selective strikes. They were trying to terrorize humanity into submission through raw violence. But something had changed in those 37 seconds of clarity. Humanity had remembered what it was fighting for, and no amount of brutality was going to make them forget again. Sarah keyed the radio one final time. Free Earth Prime to all units. Phase 1 is complete. Humanity is awake. Now let's remind our uninvited guests what happens when you threaten Earth's pack. Outside the bunker, Zephyrian assault ships were converging on their position, having finally tracked the source of the coordination broadcasts. Sarah and Korath checked their weapons one last time, knowing they had perhaps minutes before the final battle began. But as reports continued to pour in from around the world, of resistance cells activating, of civilian populations rising up, of military forces engaging alien targets despite overwhelming odds, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. Humanity was fighting back, and for the first time since the Zephyrian ships arrived, Sarah believed they might actually win. The assault began at dawn, 6 months after Sarah first met a broken alien warrior in the rain. Zephyrian dropships descended through Earth's atmosphere like falling stars, disgorging thousands of shock troops onto a planet that had spent half a year learning how to fight an empire. Sarah crouched in the ruins of what had once been Denver's financial district, her rifle trained on the street below where Zephyrian soldiers were attempting to establish a forward command post. Beside her, Korath's enhanced senses tracked enemy movements through the smoke and debris that choked the morning air. 12 hostiles advancing on the intersection, he reported quietly. Standard combat formation, but they're moving like they expect light resistance. They're about to be disappointed. Sarah activated her comm unit. Wolverine team, this is pack leader. Targets incoming from the south. Wait for my signal. The past 6 months had transformed both of them in ways Sarah was still coming to understand. The naive hope that humanity could resist through conventional military action had died in the first weeks of open warfare. The Zephyrian Empire had crushed organized military resistance with contemptuous ease, turning entire army divisions into radioactive craters. But something else had emerged from the ashes of humanity's formal. The alien king gave a disgraced wolf to a human war vet. What the wolf said stunned everyone. HFY,